I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to dismantle a man's entire life while he was sipping cocktails on a tropical beach. But when you realize the person you share a bed with has traded your most precious family heirloom for his mistress's new ride, something inside you just snaps. Standing in my empty living room, looking at the spot where my grandmother's vintage diamond ring used to sit in its velvet box, I felt a coldness wash over me that I didn't know I was capable of. He thought he was being clever, sneaking away for a business retreat, while leaving me behind to mourn a lost ring. But he didn't realize I'd already found the pawn shop receipt and the registration for a car that wasn't in my name. I have to ask you all right now, before I get into the gritty details, was I wrong for what I did? Or would you have burned it all down too? Tell me if you would have done the same thing. Because by the time he landed back at the airport, he didn't just lose a wife illegally or not, he lost the very roof over his head. My name is Elena, and my marriage to Mark was, for the longest time, what people called picture perfect. We met in our late 20s, both driven, both ambitious, and we built a life that looked enviable from the outside. Mark was a real estate developer, always looking for the next big flip. And I was a corporate architect. We bought this beautiful mid-century modern house 3 years ago, a house that, crucially, my inheritance largely paid for, though his name was on the deed for tax purposes he insisted upon. The pride of my life, however, wasn't the house. It was a 1920s Art Deco diamond ring that belonged to my grandmother. She had survived incredible hardships to keep that ring, and it was the only thing I had left of her. It wasn't just jewelry. It was my history. Mark knew this. He knew I planned to pass it down to our future children. But over the last 6 months, Mark started changing. The late nights became more frequent, the business trips became longer, and his phone was suddenly glued to his palm. I'm not naive, but I wanted to believe in us. That changed the morning I woke up and found the velvet box on my vanity empty. I panicked, thinking we'd been robbed, but nothing else was gone. Mark held me while I cried, promising we'd find it, suggesting maybe I'd misplaced it during my last work trip. He was so convincing, so empathetic, that I almost believed him. But 2 days later, while doing the laundry, I found a crumpled slip of paper in his suit jacket pocket. It wasn't just a receipt, it was a sales record from a high-end pawnbroker for the exact value of my ring, followed by a down payment receipt for a sleek, red convertible registered to a woman named Tiffany. The dates lined up perfectly. He sold my soul to buy his girlfriend a car. I spent the next 48 hours in a silent rage, gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I found their messages, their photos, and their plans for a week-long getaway to Cabo. He told me he was going to a developers conference in Vegas. I realized then that I didn't want a divorce. I wanted a reckoning. Since the house was technically in both our names but primarily funded by my family's money, and since I had a power of attorney for his business affairs from a previous legal filing we did for his firm, I saw a window of opportunity. I called an old friend who specialized in quick-close real estate investment. I told him I needed the house sold, cash in hand, within 7 days. I priced it to move, and because the market was screaming hot, I had an all-cash buyer within 24 hours. While Mark was boarding his flight with Tiffany, I was signing papers. I began moving my belongings into storage while he was posting Instagram stories of the ocean. Every time a piece of furniture left the house, I felt lighter. I wasn't just moving out, I was erasing myself from his existence. I sold the furniture, the electronics, even the high-end grill he loved so much. By day 4, the house was an empty shell. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I could have waited for him to come home and had a screaming match, or I could leave him with nothing but the clothes and his suitcase. Before I tell you what happened when his plane touched down and he realized his key no longer worked in the front door, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have gone the legal route, or is Scorched Earth the only language men like this understand? On the 5th day, the sale was finalized, the funds were wired to an account he couldn't touch, and I left a single item in the middle of the empty living room floor, the pawn shop receipt and the car registration for Tiffany's new ride. I changed the locks well. The new owners changed the locks and I checked into a hotel under a different name. When Mark finally landed, he sent me a text saying, "Home soon, babe. Missed you." I didn't reply. I waited. About an hour later, my phone started exploding. Dozens of missed calls, frantic texts. "Elena, why is there a moving truck in the driveway? Elena, why can't I get into the house? Who are these people inside our home?" I finally picked up. His voice was trembling, a mix of confusion and mounting fury. I told him very calmly, "Oh, Mark, I thought you liked selling things that don't belong to you. You sold my grandmother's ring, so I sold the house. It seemed like a fair trade." The silence on the other end was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. He tried to threaten me, saying the sale wasn't legal, but I reminded him about the power of attorney and the sole discretion clauses he'd signed when we were setting up his shell company for the flips. He had handed me the matches years ago. I just finally decided to light them. He was homeless. His reputation in the local real estate community was in tatters because the emergency sale looked like a bankruptcy move, and Tiffany? Well, as soon as she realized Mark didn't have the beautiful home or the money she thought he did, she took that red convertible and drove straight out of his life. He spent that night in a cheap motel with nothing but a suitcase of Hawaiian shirts and the realization that he'd traded a legacy for a temporary thrill. I won the subsequent legal battle because I had proof of the theft of the ring and how the house funds were handled. And while it was a messy few months, I walked away with my dignity and my bank account intact. I never got the ring back. It had already been sold to a private collector. But I realized the strength my grandmother had wasn't in the diamond, it was in me. I learned that you can't build a future with someone who treats your past like a commodity. If you think Mark got exactly what he deserved, like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe to Family Ties Chronicles for more stories of justice and family secrets, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far? Or was this the perfect eye for an eye? I'll see you all in the next story.